Okay, so today I want to read a cover story for Document Journal. So it's by Thomas Lax, photographed by Joshua Woods, and the style director is Ronald Burton II. This was published February 13th. So we're talking about Solange. I think I really like reading about her because there's so much. I feel like she's done a lot of work to create, not to create, how do we say, to like convey herself to us, because I feel like a lot of people put her in Beyonce's shadow. And so in order to have a career of her own, she's had to like really be distinct in displaying her identity, not like crafting it. Like I feel like it was always there, but to explain it to us, she had to do a lot of work, and I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so it says like in this limited edition cover story for Document Fall Winter 2024-2025 issue, the artists are joined by MoMA curator Thomas Lax to discuss water as history, material play, surrender, and the force of imagination. Across platforms, Solange advances a creative unity. The Houston-born artist began her solo musical career in 2002. I didn't know that. It's a long time ago. Followed by projects across fashion, music, and cinema. Upon releasing her critically acclaimed 2016 album, A Seat at the Table, very important album, she shot to the forefront of the sonic conversation. With lush, incisive tracks like Cranes in the Sky and Don't Touch My Hair, she crystallized a personal yet political depiction of her Black experience. I think I would have to say, I honestly feel like she did more with the visuals for those two tracks than she did with just the songs. Like the songs on their own, I think Don't Touch My Hair was a great song, but it was the visuals for Cranes in the Sky that were like, how do you say, they were like innovative. I mean, it was just very clear like how surrounded she was by like fine art, um and like classical pieces, imagery. You could see some of her ballet training. There was just a lot of shit in the videos that she was really able to tell a few different stories all in one music video. It was kind of like I feel like, I don't know, was Lemonade before this? I can't even remember, but I feel like for both of them, those were like their moments of like hitting the art scene. There's people who are putting out music, it's just like shit on a track, right? But it's like they're not like that. Maybe they're saying something, but I feel like those were art pieces, as in like you could just watch the visuals with no sound and it would still be great. And that's pretty different. Anyway, so her 2019 follow-up, When I Get Home, explored her Texas roots while sprawling out across visual media. In the ALMEDA music video, I never understood that video. That one missed me. Dancers in black suits and white leggings traverse a 5x4 grid of DMC DeLoreans, opening their butterfly doors in perfect synchronicity as if they were waving hello to the future. I'm gonna have to go watch that again. Perhaps this unanimity of dancers presaged her celebrated score for Playtime. Oh, a ballet choreographed by Gianna Racin and performed in 2022. I actually remember that and I covered that. So go back and watch that if you haven't seen that. As of late, she's been sculpting in glass. Befitting an artist with such a wide-ranging creative practice, Solange founded Saint Heron in 2013. The creative agency uses objects, including a collaboration with the MoMA Design Store, exhibitions, videos, and more, to engage with and center Black artists of the past, present, and future. I didn't know that. So Wangechi Mutu's work also transcends singular media. The artist who splits her time between studios in her longtime home of New York and her native Nairobi has worked in and beyond collage, bronze, painting, and video installation. While her most widely known works today may be her mermaid like sculptures inspired by Kenyan folk tales, she's crafted at all scales. She's cast massive bronze sculptures and made multi channel works like The End of Carrying All in 2015, projected across a gallery expanse. She's painted and collaged uncanny figures on mylar surfaces that span from above human height to the size of tabloid paper. That's cool. Many of her red dirt sculptures, which blend paper pulp, corn horns, cow horns, and glass beads, have depth of around a foot, giving them the aura of a mystical device or archaeological remnant. This blending of media and typologies is a given for Mutu, who once said she aims to conceptually disrupt binaries like African European, archaic, modern, religion, pornography. Fantasy destabilizes reality. Myth questions truth. The human, mechanical, and animal merge. As described by the new museum for a major 2023 retrospective, at once culturally specific and transnational in scope, Mutu's work grapples with contemporary realities while proffering new models for radically changed future informed by feminism, Afrofuturism, and interspecies symbiosis. This is like so Solange. Like, I don't even. Wow. Okay. Mutu is an artist who can hold conflicting ideas in tension without reconciliation, encouraging a clear sighted yet complex viewership. For Document, the pair are joined by MoMA curator of media and performance Thomas Jean Laux as they discuss water as history, material play, surrender, and the force of imagination. Solange was photographed by Joshua Woods at the Glass House in New Canaan, Connecticut. Built in 1949 by the architect Philip Johnson as his personal home, the Glass House is considered one of the most significant works of American modernism. In addition to the original house, the estate includes 14 other structures added by Johnson through the 90s. A registered National Historic Landmark, today the Glass House and its grounds are conserved by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. This is cool. So basically, they're in Connecticut, and we've got Solange talking. So it starts with a quote. It says, "I'm always brought back to Houston and my time growing up there, and what an incredible vantage point I had growing up in Third Ward." I guess so. I'm not really sure what Third Ward is. Like, I feel like sometimes people make fun of it in California and they talk about the Hunger Games in districts, how like maybe San Francisco or Berkeley or something is like District 1, like Oakland would be like District 5, like Richmond would be like District 8 or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, people make fun of that. I'm not sure if the wards in Houston are working like that. Because, like, I know that they grew up, like, middle class or, like, upper middle. I think they're, like, upper middle class, basically. But the Third Ward, like, what does that mean in relation to, like, who was... I don't feel like I know enough about Texas or Houston to, like, have a genuine conversation about this. But it is something I'm curious about. Also, it's a nice photo. I guess they're in the art museum there. It says, Solange wears a dress addressed by Tom Ford. I like Tom Ford. Briefs by Flor Mile and shoes by Saint Laurent. Anthony Vaccarelli. An Earrings by Cartier. Okay, so we've got 3 people in this interview. We've got Solange, we've got Wangechi, and we've got Thomas. So it starts with Thomas. He's like, what a pleasure it is to be in time together. Where are both of you right now? Both literally, as in where are you physically, but also what does the place that you're in represent to you? What is it bringing you in this moment? Wangechi Mutu says, I've been traveling quite a bit in the last 6 months, more than I actually want to. I love to be in one place to work and just connect with the ground and make sure I'm with my family. But right now, I'm in Nairobi in one of my home studio spaces. As much as I'm in Nairobi, I'm also in a place in my mind right now where I can dive into the work. My work grounds me, my kids do too, but in a funny way because they pull and push me so much. But my work is my rock. Thomas and Solange, where are we finding you, both literally and metaphorically? Solange says, I'm literally sitting on my bed and I'm looking out to the trees and the sun and feeling really grateful to begin a week immersed in nature. Did Solange move to Connecticut? I think she might have. I don't know. Bit confusing. I live in the woods right by the river, so this is a really special conversation because Wangechi and I are both Cancers, and when she talks about her work grounding her and being a rock, I feel a lot of grounding being by the water. I don't know if Wangechi, the water, has a significant grounding effect on you in your life. I know a lot of Cancers feel an affinity for the motion of water, and I'm sort of in a space now where I can set out to enter into new planes. This Thursday kicks off the St. Huron El Dorado Ballroom series in Los Angeles at Walt Disney Hall. There's a lot of care and tenderness that we're wanting to bring to the program. It's a really special time, a time of transition, but also a time of grounding, nature, and hiking and waterfalls, and all these things have been holding me really close lately. I'm finding some balance in my life, which is always very necessary when you're creating new things. Thomas says, I'm also a water sign. I'm a Pisces and can very much relate to that sense of flow. Solange, one place where your work shares resonance with Wangechi's is the role of the past in the present and future. For me, the water in this way that so many Black poets and artists and thinkers have considered it is a cosmology where so much that has come before can be reimagined and reused in the construction of what might come next. I ask you, Solange, to start thinking about what this Thursday means. Obviously, the El Dorado Ballroom is such a historic site in Houston. I thought it was in Los Angeles. That's what the El Dorado Ballroom series in Los Angeles. And then he's saying, obviously, the El Dorado Ballroom is such a historic site in Houston for dancing and celebration. Oh, how is it translating and transmitting out to Los Angeles? What are some of these paths that you're not just elevating but remixing, giving new life to, bringing new collaborators to? Solange says, I've always been on a quest to answer these questions about myself, and I think with each year they become more specific. So as I'm asking myself, how did I get this way? Why do I make the choices I make? Why do the things that make me tick? And where did that come from? I'm always brought back to Houston and my time growing up there, and what an incredible vantage point I had growing up in the Third Ward, being able to say that I come from not only the same neighborhood as Felicia Rashad and Debbie Allen, but also the great poet Pat Parker, and understanding what it means to come from a space where Black women have been innovating, experimenting, and reimagining the conversation of what it means to be us. All of that was second nature to me as I think about El Dorado Ballroom and how radical it was for a Black couple, Anna and Clarence Dupree, to start this in 1939 and create a space where performance could really thrive. I'm feeling the ghosts of Mary Lou Williams and Julia Perry, two composers who have completely changed the trajectory of what I know is possible. I'm really, really excited to celebrate their spirits in this temple. I'm just going to stop for a second because I just want to include a little bit of context. So maybe Felicia Rashad did like grow up in, or she lived in Houston, but I know as a child, Felicia Rashad's parents understood American racism and therefore moved her to Mexico. So, like, Felicia Rashad grew up in Mexico. like, um, so maybe, I don't know, as an adult or something, she moved back to Houston, but that's like a really significant part of Felicia Rashad's story. She grew up in she had a very like upper middle class um, upbringing because given her family's financial situation in Mexico, she was able to like attend private schools and live in a neighborhood that was multicultural, and that was a very big part of her being able to grow as a child of color, and especially at the time, right? Because that was like the 40s or 50s or something when she was like a child. So her being in Mexico was a really big part of her development as a Black person. So I'm not sure where her Houston story comes in, but we'll have to look that up. I don't know. When you ask me about the past, present, and future, I think about a conversation that I had with Wangechi, and y'all are going to be so tired of how much I'm mentioning cancers, but I really am in a season of understanding myself better. One thing about astrology is, whether you believe it or not, there definitely are patterns that align. You have a choice if you want to speak to those patterns, live up to them, or if you want to be aware of the not so positive ones and say, how can I evolve past some of the things that might be innately set in the path for me? I was just in conversation with a friend of mine about Octavia Butler. Oh, this is so funny. And thinking about Wangechi's work, I was like, the Cancer spirit is one of a futurist. So this is funny because I feel like, not even I feel, I talked about this like during COVID. Like during COVID, I went to Brazil. So I really don't know what like all the booktube girlies were talking about because I wasn't following them. But I did start getting emails that were like, Octavia told us. And so some people started like a whole book club where they were reading Parable of the Sower. And this is an Octavia E. Butler book that's kind of, it's not just Afrofuturism, it's more like dystopian realities, like that movie with Will Smith, I Am Legend. And everybody, so all the booktube girlies are reading it now because of Trump's presidency, and everybody feels like it's like the end of the world. So they all want to prepare and be like the protagonist. Though I was talking about this yesterday. So it's basically a book about this 11-year-old girl who lives in the suburbs, and she lives a very sheltered life. The protagonist, she's an 11-year-old Black girl. So the whole book is from her perspective. But basically, she sees that the city has gone to shit, and all these drug dealing, like, they're not clowns, but they're people who like cover themselves in colored paint. So they're like bald people who have like red and yellow and green paint and shit, but they're like just drug addicts. They have taken over the city. So the drugs that the people are taking have caused everyone to go crazy. So they're like burning down the city and all this shit. And she sees it on the news, and everyone in her community basically believes that these people will never infiltrate their suburb because they're in like a gated community, so they all feel safe. And she's the only person who doesn't feel safe. So she starts to like prepare for the end, basically. And then the end comes because the like painted drug addicts infiltrate her city. And then since she's been preparing, she's able to escape. But then the book is it's like one book technically, but it's divided up into these like volumes. So every volume, it's like she takes on a new value system to survive, because she has to like it's like in I Am Legend, he's the only human left. It's not necessarily like that. Like as she's going through the city and other states and shit, she will come across other communities of people, but they're all like individuals who have kind of clustered together to be able to survive, but they all have different value systems. So every time she meets a new person, she has to like understand and interpret their value system in order to survive. It's a good book. I think if you haven't read it, you should read it, but it's just really funny to see like all of the booktube girls reading this book right now. This is a book from like, was it the 70s or the 80s or something? And also, I feel like, why wasn't this on people's reading list? This is like a high school reading list book. Like, I don't know where y'all went to school. Anyway, it's like, I read that book so long ago, but it was really funny during COVID to watch people read it. And it's like not even COVID right now. And it's like, it's all the hype. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you should definitely go watch that. Or just watch a booktube girl talking about it. I just saw what's her face? She just made a content about this like 2 days ago, and I was like, this is strange. Like, this is so weird. Okay, so Thomas says, even as it's of the future, it feels in the way you describe it so imminent to the here and now. I'm curious, Wangechi, what your return to Nairobi has brought in terms of your artistic practice and also your activist practice. Are there figures from your own past or from an artistic past that you've claimed who have had any particular effect over these last years as you've made a home and studio back in Kenya? I wonder where she was before. So before Kenya, was she like in the States or something? Is that... So Wangechi says, there's a lot of resonance and a familiarity with things that I have to do with water or things that have to do with water. I'm obsessed with water in a very particular manner because I'm a highland girl. My people are from the hills of Nairi where it's quite cold. And I'm always shocked when people say it must be so hot there. And I'm like, no, it's actually cool where I'm from. The reason that water is such a powerful medium for me is because of the very surprising effect it's had throughout my life. One of the most prominent times that water showed up was when I realized I was a really good swimmer. Swimming opened up a valve in my veins of my creativity that began on earth, being on the ground, being on soil, being on solid land hadn't. The beauty about leaving home, and I'll say home in many different iterations, at the age of 17, was that I immersed myself into different kinds of water. I loved being by and in the ocean, and that's how I finally understood my birth sign and had a relationship to water. I discovered through discussions with a Cancer girlfriend that water spoke of deep sadness and transformation, danger and birth, baptism and gestation, and that's how I felt as an immigrant in those formative years of my art practice and in those early years in my life in New York. I felt like I was in constant flux between things that made me feel stable and things that completely unmoored me. Watercolor, water making, water immersion is returning to the deep, deep mind of God and the deep mind of creation and the deep mind of the woman, the female medium. So to meet other women who are not only creatives, but also understand the danger and the spark and the fire in water and the fact that water isn't just a medium that cleanses and washes, that it is also something that has brutalized people and killed people and buried people. I think it comes from something much, much deeper and older. That's interesting. Thomas asks, Wangechi, every day when I come to work at MoMA, I have your bronze sculpture, Mama Ray, from 2020 that greets me, and there's something about the way you describe the perpetual coming and going that feels so materialized in that work. It's the sea creature and assemblage of time periods that seems to have just arrived from the water onto the land. I want to ask both of you about materials within your creative life, which is vast. Even to say interdisciplinary is to assume there are disciplines. I know that for you, Solange, for many years, clay and ceramics were critical. What is your personal relationship to clay, for which water is so critical, and how has your relationship to materials shifted over time? Solange says, honestly, over the past couple of years, I've connected more so with glass. Glass has taught me more about myself and taught me really tough lessons that I was trying to learn in so many other ways, which was the act of surrender. Because I've lived such a chaotic life where I often felt like I had no control of my body, my story, my narrative, I developed an almost obsessive need for control, and it did not serve me in a lot of ways. One of those ways, which my last record, When I Get Home, was primarily about, was any time that I would enter a deeply meditative state, I would get to a place where I'd think, you have a choice to remain in control of your thoughts and your body and your spirit, or you can surrender to this unknown line in the sand that can take you to spaces that you've never been to and that you don't really know what they do to you. And I wonder very consciously, and I would very consciously exit to that state. When I began to work with glass, I realized it was the first time in a while that I had to be on the material's time and space. I had to constantly be moving, I had to constantly be dancing, I had to constantly be surrendering to the material or it would break. This material comes from sand and comes from earth, but it still appears as transparency, and I was able to see that spirit of transparency reflected in myself and in the things I wanted to say. Over time, I've abandoned all of these other materials I was working with because I've entered this love affair with what glass can be and what it's meant to me. What it's taught me, the fact that it's both solid and transparent, it reflects so much about the way that I see myself and the way that I want to see myself. That's really interesting. So Wangechi says, I'm so curious, as an artist, what's your activity like with the glass? Hmm. I'm just trying to see like how much more we have to read. It's a lot. Um, so Solange says, I was taking lessons in Florida and I did them off and on for a few months, and I made the first shape and form of the glass that evolved into the collection that I've made with Saint Huron. And then I searched high and low for a black glass blower who could further my practice and help me fabricate on a level that my skill set just was not at. And I met Jason McDonald, who is originally from Tacoma, Washington. He was working out of Philadelphia at the time, and he is a Venetian trained Murano glass blower. That's very layered, and I don't know what the fuck that is. I was really inspired by brutalist architecture and repetition, so I brought a lot of that into the design process. There's one idea of the form of Bantu knots, and it's been really incredibly fun to drink from those objects. Knowing where all of this has come from, it's very ceremonious, I bet. I love that the glasswork becomes a tangible artifact of how I see the world, but also that it elevates a mundane gesture, just even the simplicity of drinking water out of the vessels. Now I'm working on decanters, so I'm scaling up, and I have 4 sculptures that I have been trying to fabricate. Okay, well, if Solange makes decanters, we're gonna buy one because I'm a wine bitch. So let's support the cause. Okay, so then Thomas asks, in addition to the kind of intensity of belief that you both have in the fierceness of imagination, you are both people who are incredibly generous, and it's through generosity that the two of you met one another through Wangchi's work with the organization Africa's Out, which is a clear throated call to other queer folks living in Kenya across the continent and its diaspora to help one another out. In 2020, you invited Solange to collaborate with you at Barbera Glasstone Gallery, both as a creator and as somebody able to leverage our collective social force toward a set of needs. The fundraiser you organized with other artists raised money to benefit UHA, the East African Sexual Health and Rights Initiative, and to honor the late Kenyan author Binyavanga Wainaina Wangechi. Tell us a little bit more about what Africa's Out has meant to you, and when Solange, how you came into that story, what it meant for you. Wangechi. I have to say, I don't know if I've even thanked Solange enough for how quickly, beautifully, gracefully, kindly, and sweetly she rose to the occasion. Solange says, I was honored. Wangechi. It was such a gesture of kindness and trust that you gave to us for what you did. We didn't know what you were going to do. You didn't quite know what I was going to do. We just sort of went with it. I remember feeling this is a kindred spirit. Kindred is another book by Octavia E. Butler, if you didn't know that. What I wanted to do was create a full on celebration and say, it is so beautiful to be human, to be free, to be loved for who you are, to be able to create and say that it is, to say what it is you're going through, to be able to articulate your feelings and your power, that laws are being created then and now that had the power to decide that what makes people special is what they're going to be discriminated against and tortured and imprisoned for was appalling. That was a little bit layered. And instead of focusing on that feeling of hopelessness, because that's how we were all feeling, especially those of us who were looking at the legislation, we decided we'd make everyone want to be part of our party, part of our joy, part of our transformation, part of our creative evening. And it was really trying to spin a magic spell. There are a lot of concerns about the way laws are being written about sexuality and gender equality. That was 10 years ago, but it made a massive imprint because it repositioned artists and the LGBTQ African community as a fearless, exuberant, and beautiful space, as opposed to being a tortured, under the radar, misunderstood population. Of course, there are horror stories, and we know that that was a reason for doing it. But that's why I called on Solange, and I was floored at how impactful the Africa's Out celebration was. I was very happy. I still am. Solange, I have so many fond memories of that night and feeling so embraced by you and your ideas and the way that you see the world, but also all of the incredible people that surround you. The continent of Africa has given so much to me, not only as the place of my ancestors, but at one point, I was going once a year to a new country on the continent. I went to Rwanda, to Senegal, to Ghana, to South Africa, and I just felt transformed by the spirit and these places and all that it gave to me. And the poetry that came out of that, the songs that came out of that, the ideas and the thoughts, and to be able to rise to that occasion and the space that you created for that night was just so special. When I think about that night, I think about the other night when I got to congratulate you on your award at the Storm King Gala. Wangechi says, that was so fun. It was so nice to share that with you. When are the decanters out? We need to have a ritual libation. Exactly. I need that too. Solange says, I would love that. They'll be out in November and I'll make sure that I get one to you. They're very, very, very heavy. Okay, well, we might have to wait on that till we like settle in a city and get an apartment because I'm not carrying around one of Solange's heavy ass decanters. Um, how can I evolve past some of these things that might be innately set in the path for me? So Thomas asks, Wangechi, I'm curious in terms of some of the materials that have been in the work in the last 7 years or so. As I followed it, bronze, wood, red soil, which range in scale but share a pairing or juxtaposing of solidity with a sense of constant flux. As Solange was talking about surrender, I was brought back to that last sculpture, Shavasana, in your retrospective, your survey show here in New York at the new museum where you climb in this upward spiral. There's this sculpture of release at the end. What is your relationship to materials, your hope for them, but also their force on you? And then Wangechi says, it's such a continuum. I feel like I've been going back to the same classroom for years, and every time I feel like I've learned enough, I realize, no, 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 I need to understand this even more. My entryway into understanding contemporary art was very much through academia and my education, which ironically was also linked to emancipating myself and saying, you know what? I'm going to do this thing that I was told is the most absurd thing to do. I'm going to come out as an artist with all that freedom I found myself in. I also threw myself into the most unfree place, which is art school. Yeah, that's true. One of the best things about art school is that it does give you a lot of shit, angst, anguish. It gave me a lot to fight and spar against. It gave me real restrictions. That's true too, yeah. There were clearly things that were considered to be art, specific histories and specific types of work that we should anticipate making that's because that's the future is about. We were taught the figure was gone, painting was gone, conceptualism and minimalism in a very specific manner in a way of working with material is the way of the future. This was rammed down our throats to the point that I remember by the time I was in my second year in grad school, I just became silent. Who's saying this again? Oh, this is Wangechi. But at the time, I was reading Robert Farris Thompson. I was reading a lot of Octavia Butler. I was reading poetry by Senghor, tons of work. I was looking at, had so many reflections on history that understood the prominence of our voices as African and Black people and people who are not European. When I realized myself from this school thinking, the first thing I did was do this thing I didn't go to school for. I started painting and collaging and cutting things up and putting them together, and not in any appropriate, not in any way taking into consideration what is appropriate for this moment. Now, what is art history asking of us? And from what I built myself out of cobbling images and photographs between watercolor and lots of gluing of fabrics, I came up with this thing that I had never thought I was going to come up with, nor was it what I was taught to do. I worked this way wherever I went, wherever I found myself working. In retrospect, Kenya was the place I always hoped I would return to materially because my material sensibility is from my childhood. I remember the smells, the textures, the crooked trees, the pebbles and the rocks everywhere. I remember the color of the sky. So, what I found is when I'm still, and this happens in New York too, when I'm really calm and I really am with what I'm doing, even if it's not clear where I'm going, there's a childish thing that I'm able to do. I remember looking out my studio in Nairobi and going, I see all my supplies are there. They're all waiting for me. And I started to attach a bind and connect and unite them. Solange says, so fun, and I can't believe we both wore white silk. But of course, we both wore white silk. Wangechi says, of course we did. I think Africa calls you, so you need to come. You need to come out to Kenya. Solange says, I really am looking forward to coming out to Kenya. And I know that through the lens of the great Wangechi, it's going to be an experience like no other. I want to ask you about your performance work and the piece that you did, Stone Iga, in 2009. So Wangechi says, Stone Ego was my first public performance. I am petrified of public performances, so I do them. But that was me cutting my teeth with performance art. I worked with an amazing vocalist and composer named Imani Uzuri. In Kikuyu, my language, Igi, is this heavy object that comes out of nature, but it's also a name in our family. In this case, I was referring to women who've been executed using stones or executed using the most painful, violent methods, and apparently a cousin of mine who died in a terrible way that I wanted to reflect on. I wanted to create a piece that was a bit of a prayer as well as a chant, an incantation, like a breath that went in and out, a meditation, and also to capture a bit of the horror I thought must have been that must have consumed her to death. And I did it once. I just never performed it again. I gave out rocks at the performance because I wanted people to leave with something that was weighty, that was familiar to them, that reminded them of Stone Iga. I don't think I'll ever do it again. But I was also very I had just had a baby, so I felt very much in that space too, very touched by how vilified my cousin was until death. So that was Stone Iga. I can tell you more about it, but I don't know if I want to over describe it. It was powerful. It was a very big lesson for me. Solange says, I'm really curious to find out more. We can continue the conversation. Wangechi says, we will continue with our many conversations. Wow, this is cool. Quite interesting. So that article was by Document. I'm not that familiar with Document, but I wonder if there's anything else that we might be interested in reading here. I'm just going to kind of quickly browse through. Some other pieces that I want to read. I know Ao Edebiri has done an interview recently, and I definitely would like to hear what she has to say. I think her Boston roots. I don't know why everyone loves to tell me that I look like Ao Edebiri. I think that she's very pretty and everything. It's simply that when people say that to me, it's just like saying to me, I have never seen very many black people, and she is black and you are